Return of Donald Trump has brought fossil fuel, including coal, back in business. What does this mean for India? This and more in the latest episode of Energonomics. His narrative of drill baby drill or beautiful clean coal has indeed created a flutter.
I will end the devastating inflation crisis immediately, bring down interest rates, and lower the cost of energy. We will drill, baby, drill.
Call it the Trump effect or pure strategy shift, but fossil fuel is back in business, with major oil and gas players announcing reworking of their investment plans with focus on exploration and production business. While the industry believes that it was a misguided perception that fossil fuel was becoming a thing of passé, reality was something else. Will this re-strategizing by oil majors and no retirement plans for coal means slowing down of the energy transition process? What will happen to the climate commitments? To understand the nuances, I spoke to Tracy, a senior economist, Ninja Traders, and this is what she had to say.
Well, yeah, I think there's a shift in strategy by oil majors, and the continued reliance on coal kind of indicates a slowdown in that energy process. So what we've seen over the last year or so is many major oil companies have kind of scaled back their renewable energy investments in favor of their core hydrocarbon business due to higher returns for investors, of course, and with oil demand continuing to remain strong and new investments in new fossil fuel projects are continuing as kind of that cleaner energy is being deprioritized. So we also have coal has played a persistent role. Despite global net zero pledges, coal demand remains rather robust, particularly in developing economies like China and India, where energy insecurity and affordability really take precedence over these climate commitments. In addition, we've also seen a lot of uncertainty. Many governments have introduced these ambitious climate commitments, but policy execution kind of has lagged behind. And we've seen additionally a scaling back of ESG-driven financing, particularly here in the United States, and a kind of a pushback against net zero regulations, as well as we've had some geopolitical disruptions such as the Ukraine war that have further complicated this transition. What does this mean for climate commitments? Well, that means more delays in meeting net zero targets. Countries are unlikely to meet 2030 or even 2050 targets, if fossil fuel investment and demand remains high and as renewable adoption begins to slow, particularly in the West that had these aggressive goals. And we also have, traditional renewable facing challenges because a lot of these projects just aren't feasible in a non-NERP, ZERP world, and they're proving to be more expensive under these conditions than most had anticipated.
Does this mean that coal will regain its lost glory? I asked Tracy, and this is what she said.
I don't think it'll regain its past dominance, but it's still going to remain a critical part of the global energy mix for far longer than many had expected. So we can ask ourselves, why is coal still holding on? Well, energy security and affordability. Again, countries like China, India are prioritizing reliable, low-cost energy, making coal indispensable. We've even seen in developed nations like Germany temporarily increase coal use during energy shortages. We have high energy demand growth, rapid industrialization in India, is driving coal demand, especially in power generation and steel making. And then we have the problem with the intermittency of wind and solar and kind of slow grid upgrades and energy storage challenges for the renewable sector, which means coal remains a stable base load power source. And we have seen, well, like the United States now, the government's relaxing kind of their coal phase out plans due to economic and geopolitical pressures.
My next question to Tracy was that will the climate activists get more realistic now? And this was her view.
Well, they're going to have to if they haven't already. But yes, we are already seeing them adjusting their expectations and becoming kind of more pragmatic about the pace and feasibility of energy transitions. And, there are several realities kind of that are forcing this shift in their approach. So we've seen kind of the initial optimism assumed rapid adoption of renewables and a smooth phase out of fossil fuels. However, that has not occurred. Again, we have energy demand growth, grid challenges, geopolitical disruptions, all have made this transition just much more complex than anybody had realized. And I think people are coming to the realization, well, particularly oil and gas companies and coal companies, that we're going to need more oil, gas, and coal much longer than we had anticipated. So in addition, after that kind of 21-22 energy crisis that was exacerbated by the Ukraine war, particularly in Europe, that situation kind of showed that energy security and affordability take priority over emissions targets in times of crisis. And so I think we started to see governments kind of phasing out, reversing coal phase outs, approving of many more new LNG projects, and slowing green policies. This has forced some climate advocates to kind of focus on energy realism rather than a purely idealistic net zero goals. And that's why we've seen this shift towards LNG. Climate advocates didn't like LNG, they didn't like nuclear, but now we're seeing a huge demand and shift towards LNG and build out of LNG facilities globally, as well as kind of this renewed renaissance for nuclear power. We've also seen things like carbon capture and storage come to fruition, some big projects going on, recognizing that hydrocarbons are going to remain in use. So they're looking towards CCS to kind of reduce emissions rather than cut out fossil fuels. And so I think, this reality has caused kind of this backlash in ESG investing and the high capital costs for renewables, the slow green technology adoption have kind of all forced advocates to kind of rethink their position on it. Bottom line is we have to be realistic. They're not abandoning their goals, but many are becoming more realistic about the transitions pace and the role of hydrocarbons and the need for pragmatic solutions. Again, LNG, nuclear, carbon capture.
In all this, where does India stand? What should India do? I asked her, and this is what she said.
Well, India's kind of walking a tightrope right now between economic growth, energy security, and climate commitments. So it does have some renewable energy goals that are rather ambitious, but it's still heavily reliant on coal, making energy demand transition a little bit challenging. So for now, India, coal is king for now. India is the second largest coal consumer after China for 70% of its electricity. India is still expanding coal mining and power plants to meet this rising demand. Again, this is a rapidly growing economy, and energy security is paramount. So although you do have a very strong push for renewables. You've set an ambitious target of 500 gigawatts of renewable capacity by 2030, with solar and wind playing a key role. We go back to intermittency, grid limitations, and storage issues kind of are slowing this adoption a little bit. And plus, land acquisition and financing hurdles are kind of slowing some of these projects. In turn, India is one of the fastest growing oil and gas markets, with demand expected to double by 2045. And its reliance on imports is rather high, about 85% for oil and about 50% for gas. So that makes energy security a massive priority for India at this time. But again, on the other hand, we do see India expanding nuclear energy, aiming for 20 gigawatts by 2030. And green hydrogen's also been a key focus, with governments incentivizing production boosts. But, the bottom line is India is being very pragmatic rather than idealistic. It acknowledges climate change, but it's prioritizing economic growth and energy security, as it should with a rapidly growing economy. They do have, the renewable sector is expanding, but coal, oil, and gas are going to remain dominant in the near term. So I'd expect a slower phase transition rather than like an aggressive shift away from fossil fuels.
My detailed conversation with Tracy is available in the link given below. Overall, the situation is advantage India if New Delhi adopts a focused approach and works on energy strategy. This is what we have in this episode of Energonomics. Till then.